Great. Perfect timing.
This is your megaphone. It's perfect timing.
Perfect timing.
Meant to be. It's a good day.
Yeah. Yeah. This is your megaphone. You should put that into your intro.
You really should.
This is your megaphone.
Yeah. The roar and then this is your megaphone.
Welcome to Building Bellingham. I'm your host, Leo Cohen, with the Cohen Group Northwest. I'm super excited about today's episode because I get to sit down with a good friend of mine, Ziad Youssef. He's incredibly important in our community, incredibly influential, and I consider him to be a visionary in the way that legal care is done in Whatcom County. Not only has he revolutionized the way that law is practiced in Whatcom County, but his vision of making it more accessible to not only people that cannot afford law, but making it more about service and care is an inspiration to me in my own business, and I'm super excited to sit down with him to talk with him more about how he got to that point in his career. So I'm here with Mr. Ziad Youssef. This is your megaphone today. I'm super excited to have you on the show. We've known each other for a long time.
I'm really excited to be here.
Yep.
I think that this is probably going to be one of the most influential podcasts people can listen to. So I'm fortunate and blessed to know you, and I'm glad we're at this stage right now where we can have a conversation face to face like this.
Likewise, we've had a lot over lunch. We've had a lot over coffee in the office, everything. And today is the day where we can put this out there and provide so much value that I think both of us want to provide for our community in so many ways.
Let's do it.
Mr. Ziad Youssef, so tell me about yourself a little bit more. You've been in Bellingham since the 90s. You have this business called mytrafficman.net.
Yeah. I think most people would recognize the radio voice. This is Ziad
So
Youssef,
good.
founder of mytrafficman.net.
So good.
And the Legal Care Center of Whatcom County.
Yeah.
But before all of that, I was just a kid who took his parents' hands and flew to America with them at 5 years old.
You came from Lebanon.
Yes. We moved here in 1977. The Civil War in Lebanon officially had broken out probably the year before. And my grandfather had already moved here. My great uncle had gone to university in Georgia in the 50s. And I had relatives that lived in Houston. So we came to Houston. So in 1977, we moved from Lebanon to Houston. And my uncle owned an auto parts store down there.
Amazing. What was that like, coming from a place where there was a civil war, where it's a completely different culture, to coming to a place like Houston? What was that transition like for you as a young kid?
Well, I've got so much respect for the great state of Texas. I always tell people I was Texan long before I was American.
Yeah.
I didn't naturalize until 1981, and there was 5 years where I was just all Texas. And here's what Texas was for me: Southern hospitality.
Yep.
People showed up to the door with cakes and pies, and that's all I remembered. Every neighborhood we moved into, that's what I experienced. But reflecting on it now, I'm 46 years old now, and I'm reflecting back on 40 years ago. What I realized was I did feel like I was an outsider working his way in. People were always nice to me, though. Nobody treated me like an outsider. But my parents were so afraid of what the new world would bring that they created this very tight and protective bubble. You know, Mom walked us to school every day, but that was part of the bubble. Growing up in that environment made me feel somewhat isolated from the community that I was growing up in. And I started to feel like I had to earn my way into that community. And what I learned was I didn't have to earn anything. They were welcoming. I just had to give myself permission to walk out of that bubble and into the community. And I did. And it's been great. It's been wonderful. I probably didn't realize that until I was 30, though.
You're telling me that you came into to Texas, to Houston, with this kind of this idea that you needed to earn your way into the community. Do you feel like that has affected how much you love your community and how involved you are in your community today?
Absolutely. Yeah. I mean, many immigrants will tell you that the opportunities that the United States of America gives to them are so much more appreciated. We don't take for granted that you can flip a light switch on and have lights come on, or turn a faucet on and drink from it. We don't, as immigrants, don't take that for granted. But then on top of that, we don't take for granted, we learn to truly appreciate that education is available to us. In Lebanon, not everybody gets to go to the school that they want to go to. There's a limited number of schools. You're not guaranteed. You have to test your way into it. You want to go to school here, it's guaranteed through high school, and then you have financial aid that gets you through university. And regardless of how you feel about financial aid, at least there's thousands of universities to choose from to get a higher education. And so I think the effect it's had on me is to make me so proud of having that opportunity.
Was there any sort of push from your parents for any sort of engineering, for doctor, lawyer?
Lawyers get the least respect in Lebanon. So
why is that?
It's not
Tell me
much
about
different
that.
than here, right? So my parents wanted me to have a good education. They absolutely guided me toward education, but they never once told me I had to do something. It came naturally. It became something that I naturally was guided to. I think in the 5th grade, one of my teachers was like, "You argue so much and so well. You like to argue all your points. You should be a lawyer."
So not just a lot, but really well. You're good at positioning your point or understanding the other point.
And here's the other experience I had as a child. When I don't know, do you remember being asked to do career day at school where you come dressed as what you want to be when you're like in 5th grade or 3rd grade?
I showed up as a pirate.
I came as president.
Oh,
I came as president.
I like that.
That's right.
All right.
Right?
That's what I'm talking
But
about.
I wasn't born here, so I couldn't be president. So my number 2 was firefighter.
Okay. Why'd you want to be a firefighter?
Because I wanted to be a hero. I wanted to be a hero. That's what I thought firefighters were. That's what I thought presidents were. And I was too fat to be a firefighter.
Why? What?
I'm a big man. I was a punchy kid too, right?
Yeah.
So I'm like, well, I'll just be a lawyer. I think there's something noble about being a lawyer. I'd probably been studying about lawyers in school. We'd been reading about Abraham Lincoln, and I thought that was noble. But I really did want to. I had this drive to make a big impact as a young man, and I didn't like being told that I couldn't. But it was what it was. I wasn't born here, can't be president. So I'll just switch. I'll move on. I'm not going to sit there and dwell in it for too long. And that really stuck with me, that being a lawyer would work. And so when I finished high school, the practical side of my family said, "Well, you got to choose a profession that's going to be good for you if you don't go to law school." So I studied accounting at Western.
Tell me about Western.
I love Western. I have so many good feelings about that university, probably because it was a really good time in my life. All my family was close. We were really tight. I had probably 25, 30 family members, spent a lot of time together. But I'd go up to school, study my accounting classes, come home. Did that for my full 3.5 years. I always say, accountants aren't boring. It's just that you have to study so much. You don't have a lot of social life after that. But I studied accounting at Western and didn't do much other than
just school. So, and you went to SU. So you went to Seattle.
Yeah, it was University of Puget Sound when I started, and they had just sold it off to Seattle University. So the campus was in Tacoma. I spent 3 years in Tacoma, which that was an experience too, because Tacoma had a bad reputation.
Yep.
And it's changed so much. But when I finished law school, I came back to Bellingham.
And was that pretty similar at law school? Was it just head down, kind of doing your thing, studying, not a whole lot of social life, but you had this mission of getting through the schooling to get to what your bigger cause was after school?
Yeah. I think I was head down, get through it, and not really experiencing a lot of life at that time. I was making good friends I still have with me till today, but I wasn't out there doing the things that maybe other college kids would do, like taking trips. And I look now at the diversity of experiences college students are encouraged to have, and I probably support that, because if I started practicing law when I finished at 24, I would have wrecked my reputation. I would have ruined it. It would have been immediate failure because I didn't have a perspective on the world yet. That was a mature perspective on the world yet. I was still a kid wanting to explore more. I was 24. But I was a very well-educated 24-year-old kid with a pretty good head on his shoulders. And I came back to town thinking, who are my peers in Bellingham?
What was that transition going from Bellingham to Tacoma to back to Bellingham? Was it like dunking your head in cold water and coming back out? Like, what is that like?
For me, it wasn't different because I was just submerged in the same water, which is school.
Yeah.
And it just was more school. And I was good at school. So it didn't change much. I bunkered down and did what I needed to do. I got a little bit arrogant though. I thought, I could pass this.
Because you weren't used to failing at all.
No.
Like you were used to just cruising through school. And then you get to this point where you go to take your bar.
Yeah.
And what happened?
And so I'm like, man, I passed everything they had to throw at me. Why would I need to study for a bar exam? And I didn't study for a bar exam. I had a really nice summer after law school was over.
How'd the first one go?
I bombed. I failed the substantive part of the law, and I barely, just a few points away from passing, but I failed the ethics part of it too. So there's two parts of the test, and the test has changed since I was in law school, and now it's completely different even. But that was humbling. I was 25, and I looked at myself and I said, you're not taking life seriously enough. It's been too easy for you. Life's been way too easy for you. And it was really easy.
So you had been used to just being, as my mom would call it, a whiz in school. You were used to those things coming easily, and you had kind of a wake-up call.
Yeah.
Besides being humbling, what else did you feel with the failure part of it, and how did you deal with that failure on the first time? And I don't mean to lead us going forward because
I was pretty down on myself, really depressed on myself. I had split up with my fiance at the time, and I'd failed the exam, and I knew how much had been invested in my education, and I thought very little of myself then, but I wasn't destroyed.
So there's something left. There's a flame left. And so how did you take that moment right there on the first time that you failed the bar exam and pick yourself back up and rebuild your confidence, go back after it so you could take it again?
I focused on one thing at a time.
Yep.
And that was, I'd gained a bunch of weight in law school. I'm like, you need to lose some weight. So I started working out more. And if you talk to people who knew me back then, they're like, Ziad was working out 3 hours, 4 hours a day.
Just pumping iron. Only just bicep curls, or were you just the beach stuff?
Yeah, no, I was 375 pounds.
Wow.
Leo. 375. There was no beach body. I wasn't trying to get a beach body. I was trying to get a healthy body.
Yeah.
And I lost 135 pounds over 3 years.
It's amazing.
Yes, but I still failed the bar exam again.
So this is number 2.
Over 3 years, I failed it probably 4 more times.
So you failed it 4 times, and let's talk a little bit about persistence, and let's talk about how did this experience with something that I would consider you to be one of the best at what you do here in the area, if not the state, if not a large area.
Yeah. Well, the bar exam doesn't define how great a lawyer I am. I'll never let that define how great a lawyer I am, and I knew that then. I just knew I couldn't live my dream until I passed that exam.
So what'd you do to pass it?
I buckled down and I'd studied.
You studied for once.
But I had bills to pay, so I didn't have the time to study after that. The first time I didn't take it seriously. The other times it's because I didn't have time to study. I had to work. I had to pay some bills.
And I was borrowing.
I got a job at Whatcom Community College because I was looking around feeling like I didn't have any peers in Bellingham. I was 24. At 24, kids are still trying to figure out what their major is at Western. And I'm moving on, trying to get a professional career started. So I was going to leave town, and I was going to move back to Texas and maybe move to San Antonio.
So you were teaching accounting classes, and there were people in there that were your age, maybe younger, but also people that were older than you.
Well, let me tell you how I got that job.
Tell me about it.
At the same time I'm thinking about leaving, I see this advertisement for a job at Whatcom for an accounting instructor. I'd never taught a class except for I was a teacher's assistant in criminal law. In law, I'd done so well that they let me be a teacher's assistant in law school, but I hadn't had any other teaching experience. And I I wanted that job, and I wrote a letter to them explaining why I wanted that job. And the letter says, and I'll never forget it, I want a chance to influence my future peers. It was my opportunity to intervene in the problem I saw, which is, where are my peers at 20? If I'm an educated 24-year-old young person here, or young professional, who are my peers? Do they have to be 40 and 50 to be my peers? So I went looking for them, and I knew that the students at Whatcom were likely to stay in Whatcom. They weren't running from their parents in Seattle to come up to college.
To Western, like I did, right?
Well, I think kids who go to university take off from Bellingham to go to university somewhere else so they can get away.
Right.
Well, I know the kids that go to Whatcom are going to stay in Whatcom, and I wanted a chance to influence them. And so I wrote this letter, got an interview, and they said to me at the end of the interview, which I recommend this to all of my students, and I'll recommend it to anyone listening to this podcast, never leave an interview without asking this question. When I thank you for the time you've taken to interview me, what reservations will you have about hiring me? And you get an answer there that's either going to be, they're just going to shine you on and give you some BS answer, or they're going to tell you, here are your deficiencies. And you can learn from that, and you get some feedback, and you can learn from it. And I asked that question, and they said, you don't have a lot of teaching experience, but your enthusiasm is contagious.
If you ask that question, what would you say would be an indicator of someone like, you don't have the job, versus like, yeah, we have a few reservations, but here's your opportunity?
I don't know if there is one indicator that I've recognized or picked up on, but I do pick up that people are either going to say, well, we have several candidates to interview, and we're just going to give everybody a chance, and we'll give you a call back. And that doesn't tell me anything.
Yeah.
That doesn't tell me what my downside is. Right. And then there's the people who I'll never forget, the people who interviewed me. Jane Gordon Ball was an instructor in the accounting department over there, and she interviewed me and said, Ziad, you don't have a lot of teaching experience. We know you know the material, but we don't know if you can deliver it well. And that's a great thing to recognize, because if I didn't know how to teach it, it would have been horrible. They offered me a business math class at Whatcom. I couldn't do it. I couldn't teach math.
Yeah.
But I could teach accounting.
So tell me about this experience. You're basically doing this because you needed a job. You wanted to find your peers. Mm-hmm. You're trying to make some money so you could pay for law school.
Yeah.
So you could take your bar exam.
Yeah. So many of my students who still see me in the community are like, did you finally pass that bar exam? It's been 25 years or something now.
Yeah.
And they're like, did you finally pass that bar exam? I'm like, yeah, I did. I finally passed. I've been practicing for 16 years now.
I have a business now. Yeah.
It's great. It's great because it was such a part of my story. And teaching is so therapeutic for me. It's an opportunity to give something back. And then I taught for 17 years. So all these years later, I actually see my students who are my peers now, and I can run into people who I taught years ago who now are like, Kyle Morris over at the Hub. I love Kyle. I love what he does. And back then when he was in class, he was talking about what he was going to do. He was probably already doing it, but he was talking about what he wanted to do. And now I consider Kyle a peer.
You found your peers.
He teaches me things. I learn from him. He learns from me. Yes. Then here's how the cycle goes when you teach. They go from being your peers to being your mentors. How about the ones that went all the way through school, became lawyers, and now I get advice from them, like Emily Mowry. Emily Mowry took my business law class 16 years ago or 15 years ago, and is now teaching my business law class and runs a very successful business law practice here in Whatcom County. And I can name several more, but I saw that cycle. What I wrote down became true. I wrote down that I want to influence my future peers, and I did. And they're here in the community now.
Let's talk about impacting your community now. So you've taught all these years. You're seeing your peers come around. You have this just amazing megaphone. Mm-hmm. And I keep saying megaphone because that's what you have. You have this immense impact on the law community, the legal community, other business owners, your friends, your family, your peers, all of the above. Let's talk about like how did this megaphone start? You started when I met you. I met you in this. There was this little house.
It's still there.
Ohio,
it's still
right?
there. Yeah, on the corner of Ohio and Franklin Street. There is a little cabin.
Yep.
That used to be owned. Used to be a home in the 40s when there was nothing around it besides hay fields, and that little house was my office. That little cabin turned into my office in 2003 when my brother and I bought that property, and since then, we've expanded into the warehouse space next door and moved and grown into that.
Completely renovated it. You guys have gone upstairs.
Yeah. We're 5 attorneys deep, 8 paralegals, a paralegal training academy, and a technology company, all on the corner of Ohio and Franklin Street. And all these years later, I've come back and set up my office
in the same, and that's
in that little cabin
where I see you. Yeah.
Yeah, and I'm there. I spend my days there, and it's my little think tank. And it's a great sanctuary for so many people who come in and share with me their problems and concerns. And we design a strategy for getting them a remedy in court that hopefully is sustainable, something that works for them, keeps them out of the system. But that was a slow process. That was, when I first started practicing law in 2003, I passed the bar exam.
That was the year.
Oh, I was jumping out of my skin. That feeling of knowing that now I can live my dream, I'll never forget that feeling. But in 2003, I was only making $750 practicing law a month. And I was making $1,000 teaching. And I was borrowing $1,000 from my parents so I could pay loans and live. And I was living in their basement.
So you started out in this place where, and we talked a little bit about this before, but a lot of people have shame in borrowing and shame and I think we had
living in their parents' basement
and living in
Let's
their
talk
parents.
About that.
Yeah, tell me about that.
I got no shame in that.
Yeah,
there's no shame in saving money.
Yeah,
there's no shame in doing what you got to do to pay your bills.
Yeah,
there's no shame in putting some hard work in. And here's the thing: I was spoiled. I was entitled. I was that bratty kid. I know that I had privileges other people did not have. But I recognized that the only time I ever got ahead was when I decided to lead with service. So when you ask me how I got there, it's because I put my head down and served. I taught my students. I served my clients. I looked at what it is I needed to learn so I could serve better. And I led with that and I grew. And the impact, the influence that I have, it was easy. I didn't realize how I'd get here. When I was 24 and 25 and I had doubts and insecurities, which doubts and insecurities can come in.
Let's talk about those. What are some of your doubts and insecurities about at that point in your life?
My doubts right now, am I doing too much?
What does that mean?
Am I doing too much? Am I ignoring my family? Am I not spending enough time with my parents? Am I not spending enough time with my wife? Am I involved in my brother's life enough to make it meaningful? Do I give enough time to the things that are outside of my practice to make it balanced?
The grounding pieces, right?
Yeah. Well, are they grounding pieces or is the service grounding? Which one is it? Those are some of my doubts, right? But I follow my instincts now. I have a lot of clarity about what my intuition and my instincts are, and I just follow them. I don't drink. I don't do a lot of drugs. I like to eat, but I don't even eat very bad. I don't like to put poor things in my body anymore. And that gives me a lot of clarity about what my instincts are telling me, and I follow them. And this is something I knew when I was 6 years old. When I was 6 years old or 7 years old, and I knew I wanted to be president, that was an instinct, and I had no fear that clouded that because I'm 6. When you're 6, you don't have them. You don't have 4 and 5 years old.
Something happens where we get crushed by the pressures of society.
Yes, because you've lived long enough to be a part of someone else's story. And they're clouding you with their story. And now you're starting to have their fears be your fears. And you're no longer trusting your own instincts. And by the time you're 25, you're so lost down that path, you don't even know what your identity is. And I feel, when I look at you, Leo, I feel so inspired.
Likewise.
Because you have identified some of that clarity sooner than I did. So I know how much farther you're going to go. And I'm not worried that I'm not going to go far enough. I just feel like, man, if I had this clarity when I was in my 20s, boy, how much further I could do, where I could go from there. But it's very simple. Take away all those fears. Don't cloud your mind so that you can listen to your instincts and lead with service and grow. The growth comes naturally. It's kind of like letting the light come to a flower and the water come to a flower, because it's gonna grow by itself if you just let those two things happen. And that's what moving away the clouds so the light comes over onto that flower. That's
And you did something actually specifically. I think it was last year. You had this this. Now I don't want to say networking group, but it was a group where you were bringing minds, people that had different core values, but some pieces in common. Tell me more about these masterminding groups that you guys did, and because this is
Leo,
directly
it was
involved
the
in it.
most meaningful thing I had done in my life in many, many years, and it was so simple. I recognized that I was getting too much of the same perspective, that I'm surrounded in this silo of just the legal community and what the perspective of the legal community is.
It's like a group think, kind of the same.
It is kind of a group think, you know, this is our circle. This is how we do our circle. But at the same time, what I recognized was that I was having experiences that were not uncommon to someone else's experience, and I was having to process that experience by myself. And you know, in my work, we send people to self-help groups all the time. We recommend that they seek out an AA group or an NA group. We do DUI defense. We deal with addiction. And we refer people to self-help groups. This was a self-help group for me on levels beyond addiction and more about day-to-day struggles. What was my life experience today? Oh, my life experience today was that I spent 12 hours at work and didn't get home and think about maybe going for a walk with my wife. That's tough. But I'm dedicated to the work. So how do I balance that? That's a real struggle. And I'm not the only one going through that struggle.
So you basically had a group, like let's say I think the groups were made up of five people, and maybe you had a real estate agent in there. You had somebody from maybe another lawyer. You had another business owner, people that you felt brought value or it made impact in their own way.
I came up with a system. How am I going to get 5 people into a group? I picked one co-chair.
Yep.
And I explained to the co-chair what the theme of the group was. It was about inviting people that we could trust. So I would want them to pick 2 people they knew so that they would feel the trust bond was there. And I would invite one person I knew. So the co-chair would invite 2 people. I would invite 1. We would become a group of 5. And we would be dedicated to simply sharing our life experience and allowing the other group members to reflect or examine that life experience through their perspective so that we could mine it for opportunities and they could mine it for opportunities in their health, in their authentic relationships, and in their financial prosperity. So people like the idea. I was able to create 7 groups. I was facilitating 7 groups. I had 35 people in the group, and we met weekly to start for the first month to make sure everybody could make the group meetings and were committed to the meetings. And once I knew people were committed, we switched to monthly meetings, and we'd get together and just talk about what was your last week's experience.
Like opportunities. Maybe they felt like they had done a really good job with their health, or they had been eating really well, or they had found a cool opportunity that was a good example of a place where everybody could come together and work together, or hey, I've got something I need your help on, or things like that.
Well, you know, one of the group members was selling their house and then deciding what to do after selling their house. One of the group members was getting certified in doing breath work, which is this great new health.
I've done it. Have you done it?
I haven't done it yet.
I did. I actually sat in with Briddick Webb.
It was Briddick.
Briddick does breath work with Sandy Harmony, and it's amazing.
Yeah, and I'm going to get out there and do the work with him, but he was explaining it to us. And it was an opportunity for us to listen to his perspective on health and maybe mine it for opportunities in our own well-being, in our own health. And we talked about financial opportunities, challenges the communities were having. Because I also, when I was leading the groups, was asking them to be prepared to bring up questions that are concerns in our community and start looking at what solutions we could bring. And I truly think at the culmination of all of that has been to have a much broader vision and perspective of what the problems are and how to approach solutions to them. And after those groups, I was inspired to examine our housing situation and what the struggles people are having getting into homes. People are paying probably about 20 to 30% more just to rent homes than they were 3 to 5 years ago. They're spending a lot more to do that, and it's made it more inviting to own a home. But owning a home comes with a huge debt commitment. There's a lot of money you have to borrow, and there's a lot of anxiety that goes around owing that much money to somebody else. And some people like their freedom of renting, but renting isn't necessarily the most viable option anymore. And I think that's been the conversation. Is there just housing in the community? And what are we doing to address that? But, as part of my work in Law Advocates, we did a diversity training under the leadership of Karen Phillips, who I'm so grateful to her. I just want to give her some credit because she made it the mission of, not the mission, her leadership was about bringing in some race and diversity training to our board.
So what does that mean, race and diversity training?
It just offers up a new lens from which we as board members in a civil legal aid organization can view problems in the community. And it was about looking at things from a more informed perspective of how systematically racism has worked to change the color and landscape of our community. And, one of the things that we learned about was that in Edgemoor, there were deeds that specifically wrote out in them whites only. And, so.
Wow.
Right? Well, right. They're still there. Not every deed over there.
This is just in Edgemoor.
No, it's not just in Edgemoor. There are other communities where those exist. And
do you think a lot of homeowners even know that that's what their deed says?
Most people who are signing on closing are probably just signing documents, but it's illegal to enforce those anymore, so they're pretty much ignored. And that's really what I want to do. I want to ignore them. But here's the idea I had. That systemic racism that was implemented by writing it into deeds could be overcome with systemic love and inclusion. We could write into deeds language that says we as a community desire to be free from discrimination and hate on the basis of race and sex and religion and national origin, free from discrimination on the basis of sexual orientation, gender identity, and gender expression, free from discrimination on the basis of disability or ability, physical and mental ability. And I think if we were to write that down in a deed and record millions of them, Leo, I don't know. I know you're recording a lot. And I think if we just started adding one paragraph into every deed or deed of trust or any lease that gets signed in Bellingham and Whatcom County, we could then be writing the vision for our future. And 20 years from now, we truly could be free from hate.
That's beautiful.
It's so exciting to me. You heard it in my voice.
Monday.
That was Monday. I was on my treadmill and I'm just walking and I'm thinking, because I think through what's happening. I think through my world, and this divine thought entered my mind, and I knew I had to deliver the message. So I started calling every influencer I knew.
So who'd you call?
I called Ben Kinney. I called Shauna Olberg over at Savvy Bank. I called Carol over at Bank of the Pacific. I called Robert Lipston in Seattle. I called Demi Hartman at Umpqua Bank. And I'm still making calls. I haven't had time.
And what have these people said?
They love it. They love it. It's been a natural reaction. Of course we need to do this. Of course we're going to do this. And I'm going to keep calling. I'm going to call on WeCoo. I'm going to call on People's Bank.
Let's talk about the pillars of your business, because really, at the end of the day, you're leading with service.
Yes.
But it's also a business. Like, you have to, and especially when you first started, you had to make money to keep the lights on or keep the basement lights on. So originally, your first thing, you were doing kind of all of these things. Mm-hmm. You were doing the educating part, you were doing the legal care part, you were doing the recommendation part, you're doing all of it.
Yeah.
So how did you, what was that moment like for you when you were sitting in your cottage and it was you and others in that small space. Now it's just you. And you decided that you were going to start kind of leveraging out. Let's talk a little bit about leverage and what that does for the quality of service in your business.
Yeah, absolutely. So here's the journey I took. It was, I just need help keeping up with the number of people who would like to get our service.
Because you had a high level of service.
Yes. And I wanted to keep that standard there. I wanted to keep that high level. So I brought people on to help, and I wanted to grow. I wanted to grow because you're not going to master unless you grow. So if I only did 1 or 2 cases at a time, I'd never really master my craft. I'd never do it. I wanted to grow. I wanted to master it. So I challenged myself to grow. And I did that with service, and then I brought people on to help me grow. But here's how I would sum up why my business is as effective as it is. About 3 years ago, not 10 years ago. So I'm not that old in this, realizing what it takes to run a very successful business. About 3 years ago, I sat everybody down and said, do you believe in the mission?
And what's the mission?
The mission is leveraging technology to deliver better legal care with the limited number of resources we have. Do you believe in that mission? And the folks that stuck around believed in that mission. And then the next question was, where do you find your leadership? What do you find in this work that is meaningful so that you can become a leader in that position? So the next question was, what do you find that's meaningful in this work? Because if I'm having you do something you don't find meaningful, you can't get passionate about, you're not going to lead.
There's no point.
There's no point. And so it took me a few years of filtering through those questions to get people in the right positions. And
that was some tough conversations. That means that you're having conversations where people are saying, I don't actually love what I do, and I don't believe in the mission. And it's a great mission.
That's right.
But not everyone.
That's right.
So what is that like?
Or how about this?
Yeah.
I love what I do. I would love to do it in this position. Sorry, that position is not available. And so that means there's no room for you here. That's a tough one.
So people left.
They had to.
Yeah.
Because I couldn't offer them what they wanted in their life. And that would be unfair to not let them go.
So you
because
grew.
they're gonna sit there and do something they don't find meaningful because I don't have a position for them in the place that they do. There's already somebody there doing that, and they're doing it well, like leaders. So let them go find their leadership role in that meaningful place. That's a tough one because they're great, they're dedicated, but they're not in the position that they're going to be most effective in.
So this is 3 years ago. You had this moment where you had grown. You had created the legal school.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
And I remember coming up there when you first started up there, which was awesome. You were super excited, showing me all the desks and everything.
That's right.
And then you had these different parts. You had the technology, you had the school, you had what you wanted to do, but you basically grew, and then realized you're at a point where you said, well, I need to make sure people are in the right places in their head and their soul and like what their craft is.
Yeah.
So you let some people go, you moved some people around, you moved yourself around.
I did.
Tell me more about you moving yourself around to grow.
Well, I got to tell you, they hated it when I came around because I was still used to doing everything. And they're like, "What? You're going to tell us? You're going to tell us that we're leaders in this position, then you're going to come over here and tell us how to do it." Well, that doesn't work. You can't tell a leader how to do their position. I had to step back. And fortunately, my staff, they say in law firms, there's a lot of turnover. I have not experienced that my entire career.
Why do they say that?
I was
why
surprised. Because lawyers are ruthless. Get what you're going to get. It's yours. Eat what you kill. That's the standard of practice. Eat what you kill. That's how we refer to bringing cases in. You get paid on what you bring in. Well, that doesn't, if you're not being fed, if you're not growing, if you're not creating an environment where the folks in your firm can grow, then they're going to leave. And so I would say the reason I've had longevity in my firm is that I've created a place for my staff to grow. So here's the plan. I'm going to put it out there. We have 3 levels of paralegals in our firm. So each person's writing out job descriptions, but each level manages information in a different way. because essentially that's what paralegals do, is they make sure that the information that's being brought into the firm is synthesized in the most effective way for the next person up the chain.
Okay.
So whether it's a phone call at the lead at level 1 where someone's asking questions about licensing and they have to put that question together and move it to the right division of the firm. Moving on, it's about what they do with the information.
All to give the best service back to the client.
Absolutely, because you're giving the information to the person who's most passionate about it. I'm not going to give licensing questions to the felony attorney that does murder cases, right? Those are going to go to the licensing division. You have to put them in the best hand for people to get the best outcome. But here's the thing. In Washington, after getting your bachelor's degree, you can mentor under an attorney for 4 years and become a lawyer. What we'll do is we will then train paralegals, find them jobs, encourage them to finish their bachelor's degree, and then they can mentor under an attorney for about $15,000 for the whole program versus $200,000 to go to law school, right?
Big difference.
And become a lawyer. Now, you do that while you're working as a paralegal.
So you're getting actual like vocational on hands-on.
So what we're doing with
Yeah.
our paralegals from level 1 is we're like, start working on so we train them at the academy. They come in and work at level 1 position. And then we're encouraging them to continue on and do some online courses or take some classes, get their associates, get their bachelor's degree. And once they get their bachelor's degree, they've moved up and now we can mentor them to become lawyers.
It's beautiful.
Isn't that a great idea? Right.
Well,
and then my lawyers
thinking creatively, it's outside the box.
and now we're creating a model we can take across the country.
I want to talk about that moment where, and I saw the look on your face when you talked about the moment where you said, you can't grow as a leader if I'm telling you what to do with your job. Can you give some sort of advice? What would you give? What would you tell that business owner that has that, like, I built this is my thing. Like, I need to have some sort of creative input on this. What would you tell that person what that moment was like for you to realize that I can't help this person grow until I take a step back? Let's give some advice to the people that are listening for that.
Here's what I say.
Yeah.
If you truly understand your craft, then you should recognize that in order for it to grow, you need to have a broader campaign than simply one customer at a time. And if you don't step back and start dealing with the broader community, if you don't take a step back and trust that the people you have trained who have your firm's core mission at number 1 when they're at work, if you don't trust them to do their job as leaders, then you probably shouldn't have hired them in the first place because you don't want to grow. And second of all, you're going to do more important work than one customer at a time. You're going to go do the bigger, broader work.
Grow the world.
You have to in order to send that message that you want to make an impact. But here, I don't want businesses that are just there. They're going to take money out of the community and leave. I don't want to see that. I'm not a fan of that. I like to buy local when I can, but I understand people can't always afford to buy local. I get that too. But if I'm a business, I want a business that's there to make a difference in the community. I want a business that's there that's going to say, I want these young kids that are going to school around me to look at us as a role model for what you can do in your community and how you can be profitable at it. There's no shame in making a profit. I've had no shame, but I would tell that business owner, if you step back, you're going to have a bigger impact on your business than if you stay buried in.
So you're saying your job is not necessarily to tell someone what to do, but more so to find out what their roadblocks are and help them either learn to fish or remove those roadblocks and just get out of their way.
Yeah, thanks for the fishing one, because you just reminded me. I tell people now that my staff is directing the ship. I'm directing the waves.
Tell me more about, what does that mean?
Well, I'm looking where they're coming from, and I'm creating momentum in another way to make sure that the waves are going in my direction. That's exactly my job right now. My job is to not be focused on what direction to steer the ship, because I have great people who know how to steer and captain the ship and take care of the ship and the people that are on the ship and the people that get on board for the journey of the ship. It's my job to look at where the waves are coming from. And if I see a wave coming from one direction and I can start making some momentum in this way to deflect that wave or to make sure that we get turned in the right direction of that, that's my job. If you truly mastered your craft, then you will see the trends coming in your industry and you will work to steer your ship and your business into those trends. But if you're buried in the ship, you're not going to see those trends. And you have a responsibility, if you want it to be sustainable, to look for those trends. What I've been looking at is this trend of technology in every industry, and that's been over the last 10 or 15 years. You know, I talked to a patent lawyer this week about some projects we're working on, and some of the ideas that I thought were so original were patented in 99, Leo. 99.
And no one ever did anything with them.
Right? No, they did things with them. They did.
Yeah.
But they were different. It was a different application to them in 99 than you can apply to them now. So it's not like it's original, but that's how long technology has already been influencing us. Some people would say since the 90s, it's been influencing us. And they've been talking since the 90s how artificial intelligence is going to replace lawyers or replace professionals for most of what they do. And artificial intelligence is doing a lot of things like geofencing. It's already telling us where people are going. We're sending out emails simply based on where people are located, right? That's amazing technology, but we're using technology to make it more efficient for lawyers. So our practice management software helps us manage our client contacts, our documents. It helps us manage our calendar. And all of that is centralized into one management system.
This is something that you created.
No, we didn't create that. That's Clio practice management software out of Vancouver, British Columbia. It's a great. It's the leading on cloud-based practice management software for lawyers. But we develop add-ons to their.
So your
software.
app. You're talking about your app.
Where our app is an add-on to that. Yeah.
Tell me about your app that you created.
So our app that we currently use. Right now is our infraction app, where you can submit a traffic infraction online to us at the My Traffic Man website, and you just click Fight Your Ticket, submit your ticket, and we assign it to one of our affiliates in the state. And that was another thing I learned. I don't need an office in every corner of the state. I just need a good sister office in every corner of the state, where someone who already believes in the work as much as I do is doing great work and maintains an office there. And we just collaborate to bring resources to them in exchange for them doing the good work that they do for our clients.
That's awesome.
It is awesome. It saves so much on brick and mortar maintenance.
And I've used this app, by the way. I drive really fast. I have a lead foot, and
Yeah.
I didn't even know. I didn't know that the app was there yet. So I think I
Yeah.
texted you, and you just sent me the app, and I signed in, did it. It was super easy. I just took a picture of my ticket, sent it in. It was taken care of. It was very
we get
easy.
you an email. We let you know it's all done. Here's the thing. Here's what happens after you send it in. We order up reports, we review them, we look for legal issues, we contact prosecutors if there are prosecutors involved, try to negotiate a dismissal prior to court, or if we think that it's a more risky case, try and negotiate a better outcome like a reduction in the ticket. And if none of that works, then we go to court for you and fight the ticket, right? Now that process is a few hours. So tickets cost about $300 to fight. You pay about $700 over 3 years in insurance if you get the ticket on your record. So it's always worth spending the money to have it dismissed or reduced. But the technology we're working on now is going to skim those reports for us and spot legal issues.
Tell me about that.
So imagine if you had in your world a real estate contract and you wanted to skim it for specific language, like lead-based paint language or asbestos language. You'd have to flip through the pages to get to the one that said that. And if you had thousands of those where you were looking to see if the lead-based paint language was included in it, then it could take you hours to do that. But the computer, through artificial intelligence, can do that in seconds, in minutes.
Spot all the issues, make it easier for you to digest them.
That's right.
Make you not go cross-eyed, things like that.
We're one checkbox away from being able to go from 3 hours of work to 30 minutes to 3 minutes of work.
And when is this,
on a traffic infraction.
when do you imagine this to be completed?
As soon as somebody gives me $100,000.
I'll go write a check. I'll go work
I
on it.
appreciate it, Leo. But we're bootstrapping all the way because it's just a slow process.
Yeah.
To me, it's about changing the industry slowly because most lawyers would never trust that. Most lawyers are like, well, I'm not going to trust a computer to tell me if that's the proper legal issue. Even though one of the document management companies, software companies, legal document management companies just sold for $440 million.
It's a lot of money.
That means lawyers are trusting it to do the document management that it needs to do through artificial intelligence. It's one step away from teaching a computer how to spot legal issues in a speeding ticket.
Beautiful.
Right? And we bring the price down to $50, not $350. And then you're increasing access to justice because each lawyer can do more for less.
You're all about mindset. You have so much of what you've done is about mindset. There's this famous question of success and luck and skill. How much of your current success, of the things that you've created with the people around you, with this amazing family that you have, and making a change on a bigger scale, how much of that is attributed in your mind to skill, and how much would you say is attributed to luck?
No luck, skill and faith. Luck doesn't come into my conversation. Skill and faith. When I doubted my skill, I had faith that I'd catch up to that curve. It's a lot of faith. And I think that here's examples of where people had faith in me, where my skills came through and people had faith in me. In 2003, when I passed the bar, I didn't have enough money to buy an office. But my brother was courageous enough to reach out to Jim O'Brien, whose son just ran for mayor. Garrett had just run for mayor, and my brother reached out to Jim O'Brien, who owned the property that we're on right now, the one at Ohio and Franklin Street, and said, "Look, we're a couple of guys. My brother's a lawyer. I'm a used car dealer. We get no respect in the world. All right. We want an owner contract on this piece of land." And Jim O'Brien accepted 25% down that we had to borrow from my uncle and took a chance on us to owner contract because we couldn't go to a bank and get a loan. And that's how we bought that piece of property. And
that's the faith aspect right there.
He had faith in us. He had to have. Otherwise, why would he do that deal? It wouldn't make any sense. We didn't have any faith in us. So there's that part of it. And then we used our skill as best we could. And there were rough times where we almost lost that property. Rough times where we couldn't make the payment. We weren't making enough money to make the payment, and we were going to lose that property. And fortunately, just before we lost the property, my business got to the point where I could buy it outright.
You jumped on it.
And I jumped on it.
I love it.
Yes. And that was a skill. I had to use my skill to do that. And then rather than give up on the property, we had to have faith. We didn't luck out that my credit just got good enough right in time. I used my skill to get my credit up, and I had faith that things would work out, so we toughed it out. And that's what I would suggest to people, that it's a combination of use your skills, understand what you can do, and have faith in the rest. And that kept my blood pressure from going over. This is another piece of advice I got from a good friend. He came to me, he saw me frustrated, and he's like, "What's going on, Ziad?" He's like, "Man, the judge didn't do what I wanted him to do. Prosecutor just wasn't responding to what I wanted them to hear." And he's like, "Oh, I see your problem." Right, yeah. The judge didn't do what I wanted him to do. He's like, "That's not your problem, Ziad." I'm like, "What's my problem?" He said, "You're trying to control it. You're trying to control it. You think you're in control," is what he said to me exactly. And you're not in control. You can do the legwork. You can use your skill and do the legwork. And the rest, you have to leave to faith. And I felt my blood pressure drop 20 points. And I'm like, you're so right.
Focus on what you can control.
Not even what you can control. Do the legwork, right? Because control starts to get us in this control mindset. You start to have this like inflated idea of what you can control. Just do the legwork. And what you thought you could, even if you think you could do more, if you didn't do it, guess what? You couldn't do more. Right? Because so if you think you can control it, you're going to expect that you can do all. But the truth is, do the legwork. And if someone asks me, well, what's the legwork, Ziad? It's the work you have to get done until you can no longer do it.
Just whatever you have to do.
Yeah.
And Ziad, you're one of my favorite people. I want you to
so
know
are
that.
you, Leo. So are you.
I am so grateful that you took the time to sit down with us today and talk a little bit more about your story, talk a little bit more about you, what got you here, and on social media, mytrafficman.net, and then Legal Care Center as well.
Yeah.
And then where can people find you on Instagram and Facebook?
So at mytrafficman on Instagram, and they could follow me on Facebook, Ziad Youssef. And I'm on TikTok now, at mytrafficman on TikTok.
What?
Yeah.
Oh,
yeah.
Jumping on
I'm kind of silly on TikTok. It's like nobody else is on it that knows me. So I'm a little bit more silly on TikTok.
So you can do whatever you want on there.
Yeah. Yeah.
So we all appreciate you at the Cohen Group and at the Bell Pod Network and Building Bellingham. We all really, really appreciate you jumping on the show with us today. Thank you so much for joining us.
I'm so happy to be here. Thanks, Leo.
Cheers, my friend.
Cheers.
Again, I'm your host, Leo Cohen, with the Cohen Group Northwest. Today's guest was Ziad Youssef of mytrafficman.net and the Legal Care Center. This episode was produced by David Pender Lofgren. It was recorded, mixed, and edited by Andy Rick at Binary Studios. Our social media Jedi is Cooper Hansley. Our blogger is Tiffany Holden. Our theme music was written and performed by Aaron Guest, and our logo was designed by Sam Vogt. For show notes and links, visit www.livebellinghamnow.com/blog. Building Bellingham is a proud member of the Bell Pod Network, a collective of independent podcasts made right here in the city of subdued excitement.